The rain held off in Uptown as the Panthers and Browns took the field for joint practice. How did the boys in black and blue look? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. The mailbag will be back every single Wednesday throughout the regular season and quite possibly the postseason for your Carolina Panthers, starting on September 3rd, ahead of the Week 1 opening matchup in Jacksonville. In the meantime, you can at me or DM me over on Twitter or at me over on Blue Sky at Julian Council of any questions that you have throughout the preseason and throughout camp here in Carolina. And it was a important day for the Panthers on a Wednesday morning as they took the field in Uptown Charlotte. A cloudy day, but the rain was able to hold off as they had joint practice with the Cleveland Browns ahead of their preseason opener on Friday evening in Uptown Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium. And here is all that I saw on Wednesday. The first thing I observed was Deshaun Watson being in attendance. We talked to Spencer German of Locked On Browns yesterday on the show about the situation that they have at quarterback and really the situations they have at quarterback. Joe Flacco, probably the top of the depth chart. Kenny Pickett, he's dealing with a hamstring. He was out there, but was not a part of any of the team, period. Dylan Gabriel, didn't see him. Shedeur Sanders, he was there running with the twos and will start on Friday. Tyler Huntley, he's now around. And then, of course, Deshaun Watson, who's technically, I suppose, is still the franchise quarterback, but not really, as the Haslam family came out and flat out said, yeah, we made a mistake. Well, yeah. No duh. And that's one of the crazy things about it. Jimmy Haslam, one of the worst owners in the NFL, was able to make a worse decision than David Tepper, who's also been one of the worst owners in the NFL, as Haslam gave Deshaun Watson the guaranteed contract, where David Tepper looked at that and said, I'm not so sure if I want to give him all that money, considering all that's going around with his situation, which, I mean, let's be honest, gross. But yeah, he was out there. I found that to be interesting, but not really important. Robert Hunt was right there behind the offensive lineman. I was when I got out there. He was wearing an elbow brace on his right arm, so something to monitor. And I'll certainly try to ask him if I do see him in the locker room following the game on Friday. Derek Brown, he went through warmups but did not participate. That was actually expected, as he is dealing with a rib and an oblique issue right now. His knee's fine though, but he's still kind of dealing with some things as he gets back into shape and ready to go ahead of Week 1 against Jacksonville. Jaycee Horn, this was the big news. Apparently, he was involved in a car accident on Wednesday morning on his way to the stadium, and apparently it happened right there on the intersection of Minton Moorhead, where the Panther Stadium is, and he would look like he was probably turning in to get to where the Panther players park at. No clue what happened, who was at fault. We still don't even know with Andy Dalton what the situation was there as far as who was responsible for the accident. Can't really get that police report unless you've been involved in the accident. If you've ever been in one, you would know that. So maybe someone can do some sleuthing and figure out what the situation was. Now, what we do know is that he was out there at practice. He had still the same energy as you would typically see. He had stitches in his left thumb. So they didn't want to put him out there, they being Dave Canales and the Panthers organization, without really knowing if there's any other aches that he has, as a lot of times, if you're in an accident, the next day you feel pretty sore. So we'll find out about that with Andy Dalton and his thumb last year on his throwing hand, the right hand. It wasn't really until the next day where he felt really sore, and that's when they made a decision to have Bryce Young be the starter for that game against Denver. Then the rest is history. So JC will not play on Friday, and the hope is he'll be ready to go next week in Houston for joint practice, and then he'll be out there for the game next Saturday down there in Houston. So JC seems to be fine, just stitches in his left hand or his left thumb, and he was not able to participate. Saw Nick Scorton dressed out. He had been banged up with his own hamstring injury, but he did not participate in 1v1 drills, but he was out there during 11v11. I meant to give y'all updates yesterday from what Dave Canales had to say to the media, and he was saying that Scorton was in the same boat as Hunter Renfrow as far as they were apprehensive to throw him back out there without 5 to 7 days of strengthening that hamstring muscle. Well, apparently he was good enough to go during 11v11, but was not out there during some of the more like high, like contact kind of situations like 1v1. At least that's what I saw. So we'll see. 7v7. Looking at some of the periods where the Panthers good were against the Browns good. Bryce Young at quarterback had a pass breakup targeting James Mitchell at tight end. Adam Thielen had a nice reception on an in route. Touchdown to Jalen Coker. More on him later as he had a really good day out there at camp today. Had a touchdown on a post route. Also found Xavier Legette on a short slant, and he rotated out. When he got back in there, he bounced the throw to number 43. And I had to go back to the roster card because I was like, who is that? Tyler Mabry. They've been throwing a lot of tight ends out there, aside from, of course, Tavion Sanders and Mitchell Evans, the 5th-round pick from Notre Dame, as Tommy Trimble has been out. They've been giving guys like Bryce Pierre and Tyler Mabry and James Mitchell a lot of opportunities to show what kind of depth they have at tight end. There was a pass breakup when he was targeting Jalen Coker, but no one was open on that play. So Bryce just trying to make something happen. And then there was a DPI later on Tony Brown of the Browns, who was covering Tedero McMillan, who was targeted a lot. And there was a really nice throw by Andy Dalton to Jalen Coker. That was actually one of the highlights that you saw that the Panthers put out there. Had somebody send that to me, I suppose, as their argument that Jalen Coker is as a dude. If you want to use a highlight tape or just one highlight from a practice you didn't attend as your evidence that, yeah, Jalen Coker's that guy, by all means, go ahead and do so. Kind of weird, but if that's what you got, that's what you got. But yeah, really good throw by Andy, good anticipation, good catch by Jalen, who again had a good day. We'll talk more about him. Overall, as far as 7v7 went with that period, Dave Canales talked about, he said that he didn't think Bryce and the receivers were on the same page during 7v7, but then they got on the same page later on. Had a nice red zone 7v7 period where there's a pass breakup that was thrown behind JT Sanders. And then I think this is really what Dave was talking about. There's an incompletion. Adam Thielen, who ran into another receiver, fell down. Was an incompletion to Tedero McMillan in the end zone, which was really a drop. It was a tough catch, but he's got to catch it in that situation. Then later on, a touchdown to Xavier Legette. So I think that was probably more of what Dave was talking about when he was talking about the red zone 7v7 period not being where they were on the same page. 11v11 in the red zone, short gain, Chuba Hubbard, and running the ball. It was difficult to really like take too much away from that because they are live, but it's more like thud. They're not bringing them to the ground. So yeah, Chuba goes in there, has like a nice little short game, and then he takes some contact. Is he going down? Is he not? Like they're running to the end zone regardless. So short gain there. There's a completion to Tedero McMillan. That would have been a 1st and goal. Nice looking like 15-yard completion. There's a completion to Jalen Coker on another out route. Bryce later on scrambled in for a touchdown. The second time they were out there, thank God they weren't live and this was not a game, because Myles Garrett absolutely blew up a reverse they ran of Rico Dowdle, which would have been a loss for like 5 and maybe the end of Rico Dowdle's life, because Myles Garrett is a physical specimen. I was talking to somebody walking out just about how big he is, and I'm being like, that's not God made, man, because God had to take the day off when he was made that day because somebody got in the lab and decided, let's make him mutant and have him play football. But crazy how big that dude is. Not a lot of riffraff, no fricasses out there today. There was some jawing, as you would expect. The competition level was high. One wild moment happened. I actually asked Bryce Young about this afterwards, where number 28 on Cleveland, and let me see, the roster card says 28 is Rashawn Jenkins. After one of these plays during the red zone 1 or 11v11, dude has the ball. He's marching over to the Panthers huddle and just chucks it right into the back of Chuba Hubbard's helmet. Wild stuff. And my reaction was like, what the hell? And of course, a little bit of pushing and shoving there. Shocked, honestly, that it wasn't more than just that, as that was just an insane moment. And Chuba did tell us last week when he came out swinging, when he got hit high by Trevin Wallace, that sometimes he reacts crazy. If that is the reaction that Jenkins had, I'm kind of happy we didn't get to see Chuba Hubbard's reaction had no one been there in front of him. As might have had an all-out brawl there, but overall, offense during the red zone period, I had some more success 11v11 than 7v7. And then looking just at the offense versus the Browns defense and just a normal team period trying to move the ball. Austin Corbett, he was up repping with the ones at center. The Panthers released their unofficial depth chart on Tuesday evening, and that has Austin Corbett as a starting center. We'll see if he's a starter on Friday. And there's some things that I also look at the depth chart, and we'll talk maybe more about this on Friday's show, where you probably shouldn't get super focused on it, like Corey Thornton being a fourth team corner and a Caleb Evans being ahead of him. Like, that's not how things are playing out at all, but we will see how all that ends up. But yeah, there was a nice little done. I only saw the second period because I was sitting there trying to watch the defense, who was on a farther end of the field. They're on the second field close to the Cedar Street, and they were going to the opposite end. So it was hard for me to see a lot of what happened defensively. Offensively, they were on the field closest to their train tracks into the stadium, and they were coming the way towards the media where we were in the end zone. So was able to see more of the offense when I was observing them than the defense. But nice dump off I saw during the second session of 11v11 as JT Sanders had a nice gain down the sideline, nice catch to Xavier Legette with pressure in Bryce Young's face, a short completion to David Moore. They moved the ball pretty well there. Canales, he said he liked the first team period and felt like the second was sloppy. So there were a couple of false starts there during all of that. I did not see the first team period, as again, my eyes were diverted to the other field trying to see how the Panthers' new look defense was playing. Andy Dalton had an interception during one of them, but it looked like it was Jaycee Horn kind of stopped his route, which led to the interception. So overall, offensively, I thought that they are, again, heading in the right direction, trending just a little leggy, as Dave said, as he feels like some of these guys came out a little bit tired. And that's what happens. You have back-to-back practices, and they get a nice day off on Thursday, or I think it's a walkthrough in preparation for the game on Friday evening in Uptown. Looking at the Panthers D versus the Browns offense. Joe Flacco, he was at quarterback with the first team. I had saw some reports out there. I think it was ESPN Cleveland saying that Sanders was expected to get, Shador Sanders expected to get some first team reps. I did not see that. I saw Joe Flacco out there and then Shador with the twos. Now, LeBron Ray, he was out there for first team reps along with, I believe, Bobby Brown and Turk Wharton again. They're on the other side of the field. A lot of people in front of me. So I think that's what I saw. I saw Jaden Crumley definitely rotate in there with the ones at one point in time. There was only one big play I saw the defense give up. It was a deep crossing route, Flacco to Jerry Jeudy. I think it may have been a touchdown. But other than that, they look pretty stout. Pat Jones, second, had a nice little run stop. Mike Jackson had a nice pass breakup when covering Jerry Jeudy on a corner route. Thomas Incoom, who's been taking some strides forward, he had an interception of Shador Sanders, I believe, there during the two section. So I thought defensively, didn't look like they're giving up a lot on the ground, and that's without Derek Brown being out there. Looked like the linebacker play was solid, certainly. Mike Jackson showing you his value as a number 2 corner in Carolina. So, yeah, I thought defensively from what I saw, and again, hard to see everything, 2 fields, 2 things trying to focus on, 2 eyes, 1 man, extremely flawed man, of course. I thought the Panthers defense looked pretty good. Special teams wise, looks like they're starting to cut down some of these competitions as far as returning goes. Jaycee Horn and Raheem Blackshear are the only guys I saw fielding punts. So looks like it's a battle between those two, and Blackshear, that's his way onto the roster. The first 2 guys who return kickoffs was Rico Dowdle and Raheem Blackshear. Dowdle was the one who was returning with Blackshear blocking. David Moore, Trevor Etienne were also on kick return team with Etienne returning, but he dropped the kick, so David Moore got an opportunity the second time around. He caught it and returned it. Jaycee Horn and then Kayron Lynch Adams were the next group, with Lynch Adams returning. Also important, and we're going to have a conversation about this guy in a moment, Jalen Coker was on kickoff team. Big question about Jalen Coker with the depth at wide receiver is if he's not going to be among the top 3, which is very clearly the case, and if he's not even going to be ahead of Hunter Renfrow, who appeared prior to the hamstring injury to be a number 4 guy, then he's going to need to be able to play special teams, which he did not really do last year. But he's out there on a kickoff team, and Dave Canales had some positive things to say about him afterwards, which we'll talk about momentarily as far as where he fits into all of this. Then Matthew Wright, he was kicking on the normal upright as the other skinny post was being used by Cleveland. And to me, it looked like he went 4 for 5, making his first 4 and then coming up short on the 5th one. I did not have the perfect angle as I was like standing here. Goalpost is like to my right. And it did look like he was short. There was no official under there. Now, there have had officials who've sat under there and not even signaled at all. So I think it's overall, when looking at what I saw on Wednesday, it did not change my opinion of what this team is going to be. I felt like they had a chance to be much better against the run because of the additions of Bobby Brown III, of well, hell, you got Trevon Merrick in there at safety, who we talked to afterwards, after practice, and then also you had Turk Wharton in there, and then Derek Brown, more importantly, is coming back in. So I felt like those additions plus Derek Brown were going to make them better. And without Derek Brown, it looked like to me that Carolina won the day as far as stopping the run defensively, and they didn't really give up any big plays aside from that one big play without having Derek, without having JC. And that is a positive thing, even though I'm not expecting the Browns to have a good offense at all this season, whether it be Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett or any of the quarterbacks. I don't think they're going to be very good. So without your top two defensive players, you weren't really giving up a bunch, especially on the ground. That is a positive offensively. It's still just kind of a work in progress. I'm trying to get on the same page as typically the offense is behind the defense. I thought from what I saw from them that they had some pretty solid periods, a little up and down. We'll see more of them in a live game setting on Friday evening, which will be good to see for a group that I think really wants to get off to a good start on the road against Jacksonville week 1. So my opinion has not really changed with this team. I think if the additions on the defensive line and Turk Wharton and Bobby Brown have the same kind of impact as Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt had last year, and if the quarterback continues to trend in the right direction and gives you more of what you saw in the second half of the season and never again what you saw weeks 1 and weeks 2, this can be a team playing meaningful football in December and then early January there in a regular season. Like, that has been how I felt about Carolina. I'm looking at like 7, 8, possibly 9. I'm not saying the P word, but this is a team that what I watched from them today against what's going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Now, a good defense, and certainly if they get any stability quarterback-wise, they could win some games, not nearly enough to go to the playoffs in the AFC, but I thought like that is clearly Carolina a better team than Cleveland. So that's really the grand takeaway from a day where, yes, it's good to see him go against somebody else. It's a simulated situation. It's positive, all of that. But it's also like, okay, it's joint practice. They got good reps in. They're trending in the right direction. Like, that's the way I see everything from a cloudy but not rainy Wednesday morning there in Uptown as the Panthers wrapped up joint practice with the Cleveland Browns ahead of their opener in the preseason on Friday night in Uptown. Jalen Coker. Talked about him on Friday. Apparently, there's some hurt feelings. Cokeheads out there may think I'm a Jalen Coker hater. Definitely not the case. Not really that big of a deal, but he did impress on Wednesday. We'll talk more about where he fits in and have this conversation yet again on Locked On Panthers. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the greens, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Had a special training camp edition of the weekly Friday mailbag last Friday, and a ton of the questions centered around the wide receiver position in Carolina, as that to me was the most interesting position group. And to this point, it still is the most interesting position group on the roster as we figure out what the roles are going to be and how many guys they're going to keep. And with that conversation that we had and the question that y'all asked me, we talked about the scenario of whether they kept 5 or 6 or 7, or who could potentially be traded away. And we, of course, talked about Jalen Coker, because dating back to, hell, when Tyrell McMillan was drafted back in late April, I wondered then and there, what is Jalen Coker's role going to be? And then when Hunter Renfrow was signed by Carolina, and then we saw what Hunter Renfrow looked like at the beginning of camp, it again begged the question, where does Jalen Coker fit in? Now, apparently there seems to be some hurt feelings from whatever I said on Friday. And I don't remember everything I said because it's been since like Thursday when I talked about it. But whatever. We're here talking about it again now. Jalen Coker had a nice day. He did. And I have felt like a lot of times, like when Hunter Renfrow has looked really good during 1v1s, yeah, Jalen Coker's also looked really good during 1v1s as well. Like I have mentioned that on the show. And maybe you don't listen to every episode. Maybe you have a hard time hearing. I don't know. But I have thought that Jalen Coker has looked good. Has he been great? Has he been a standout? Not necessarily. But today, I did feel like he was a standout, and he's had more of an opportunity to stand out because like Hunter was not around and we don't have that focus. And look, it's a nice story. It's a guy who's been a Pro Bowler. He'd been sick, and a lot of people wondered if he could be healthy. Is Carolina getting a steal in Hunter Renfrow? And it appears to me that that could be the case if he can bounce back from this hamstring. And that is a big if, because that can be something that lingers. And right now, Carolina thinks he could be able to play. But again, they want to give him some more time and not rush things. And should have asked, we didn't ask whether he's going to play on Friday. We'll find out. I would think at the worst, he'll be back next week for joint practice next Thursday in Houston, and then probably playing in that game on Saturday down in H-Town. But Dave Canales had a lot of good things to say about Coker, who again had a nice catch. That was a highlight play that the Panthers put out there on social media that was sent to me. Just a simple @Julian Council that was sent. And I was like, yeah, I was there, saw the play. And the person's like, well, how's Buddy last man out? Or odd man out. It's like, well, I didn't say he was the odd man out. We had scenarios. And if like they're keeping 5, if he's not playing special teams, then maybe they don't keep him. But I don't think they're going to keep 5. If they only keep 6, like it'd probably be David Moore who would be the one that you don't keep because he's going to be a vested veteran. He's going to be available anyways. If they keep 7, well, then obviously he's going to be on the team. Just the question is, where does he stack up? But Dave Canales had a lot of positive things to say about Jalen Coker because he said after that 5-week break that he came back a different athlete, and that during OTAs and during mandatory minicamp, you could see him ramping up, and that he's come back faster, he's come back stronger, best shape of the life, all the stuff that you always hear. But like, this is a common theme of a lot of guys. We're heard about JT Sanders, who's impressed. We're now hearing about Jalen Coker, who has continuously won a lot of his reps and has not at all been a disappointment, I think, during camp. Like, it depends on who you talk to. I had someone come up to me today, part of the media corps, who didn't really think Coker was having that great of a camp. I was like, I mean, I think he's had plenty of good opportunities and chances and plays, but it's not like he's been one of the standouts because maybe we haven't been that focused on him because there's a new receiver in town in Taylor McMillan. Also, Xavier Legette, the first runner from last year, remember him? What's his step forward going to be, as he's clearly going to be a part of that top 3? And then, oh, look at this shiny thing, Hunter Renfrow. So Coker really hasn't been like a focus for a lot of us. I know for the Cokeheads out there, y'all love him, and good. I think the Cokehead thing is hilarious that's what you guys are calling yourselves. But a lot of times, like the stan culture, which we see oftentimes in sports, for whatever reason, it's dipped into politics, which is weird as hell. Like you're not willing to listen to anything that's not that your guy is the best guy ever, which fine. Like fan culture, I get it. Like love the dude, and like he's a very nice guy. I want things to work out for him long-term in Carolina. Just the reality of the situation is once Tetero McMillan was drafted, he was going to drop down a rung on the depth chart. He wasn't going to be in that top 3. And like maybe Adam Thielen is going to be the guy they decide to move off of. I could see the value that other teams want in Adam. Now, I wonder if they trade him, what the contract, what Carolina has to keep, and what the team would be acquiring, and all that would be. But hell, I don't think Carolina was still a young receiving core, and I know Hunter Renfrow's in there. I don't think that they decided to give him more money just to trade him 4 months later. It could happen, certainly, but I don't think that is a part of their plan. So Adam's going to be here, it sounds like to me. I venture to guess that would be the case. XL is going to play a big role. Tetero McMillan's going to play a big role, and he saw a ton of targets out there today, which is kind of leaning into he will be that number 1 guy. Maybe not day 1, but eventually, I think sometime this season, that will be the case. So once T-Mac was brought to Charlotte, that bumped Jalen Coker down to at least the 4th guy in the depth chart. And then when Hunter Renfrow came out looking like the old Hunter Renfrow circa 2021, that felt like then Coker was being dropped down to the fifth guy because Hunter could also play special teams and be a returner, even if he's not going to be the primary guy. And he looked really good, like better than everybody, honestly. So at worst, it felt like Jalen Coker was the fifth guy. And at best, he was the fourth guy. And when you get stuck there in the middle, even if they're going to keep 6 or 7, you don't want to be the guy who's kind of known to not really be a special teams kind of dude. And I'm not the only one who said this. Plenty of people have stated an opinion, and really just like the fact that he didn't really play special teams last year. Let me just go ahead and pull it up on Pro Football Reference just to look at the amount of snaps and the percentage that he played last year, special teams wise. He played 31 special team snaps last season, y'all. That's 10% of the snaps that were available to him in the 11 games that he played. 31. So that's not really a special team guy. Contrast that to a guy like David Moore, who is really here to play special teams and to not be necessarily a receiver, can be called upon like last year when injuries happen and trades happen. Last season, David Moore played not that many more, but he did play more. I'll say it, 52, and that's 11%. So he didn't play a lot, but not like, I mean, he wasn't supposed to be the main returner, kind of posed to hold my argument, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead, laugh. I get it. That's exactly kind of more of a role. Like you're seeing him more of as a returner. But it was good to see Jalen Coker out there on kickoff because that's just showing, and Dave said, like it's showing that he's a guy who has added to his arsenal and what he can provide to the team. And that's a big thing. So like, yeah, Jalen Coker's going to be on the roster. I don't think he's going to be traded. I know when we had Mike Kay on here before training camp, he mentioned that Jalen could be the odd man out. That wasn't what I said. I went over the scenarios that you guys asked me. And if it's 5 guys, you're probably not keeping him over a Horn who you brought in to be a returner if he's not going to be a returner for you. And if he's not necessarily a core special teamer, which it looks like he's going to participate far more this year than he did last year. Because hell, if you're going to be on the roster, you're going to be part of that active, 46 or whatever it is on game days, you're going to need to play special teams, especially if you're not going to be among the top 3 or 4 receivers on the team this year. So yeah, I think Jalen Coker, he's going to be fine. He's going to be around. It would be short-sighted. And I've said this so many times. It feels like to me it'd be short-sighted for Carolina to move on from him, whether it be trade. I don't think he's going to get cut. It'd be short-sighted to move on from him when it's likely Adam Thielen's last year. And we have no idea what happens if Hunter Renfrow this season. Like Hunter could flame out. Hopefully that's not the case for him or for Carolina, obviously. But maybe he doesn't end up filling Adam's role. And then if that's the case, you have T-Mac, you have XL, and then you have Coker as your top 3. Or at the worst, you have Jalen in there as a part of that top 4 with Hunter Renfrow next season. And I think a really good situation for Carolina to be in, whether Bryce is the quarterback or not. Like offensively, like that is where you want to be, especially when you compare to where they were just 2 years ago and even having in the last season, before we even knew what Jalen Coker could provide on Sundays. And again, a guy who made the team, was immediately cut after the waiver wire claims, and then didn't really get an opportunity until Adam Thielen was injured and Deontay Johnson was traded away, but he took advantage of that. So solid player, a guy that is worth keeping around, is adding to his value because of special teams. In no way, shape, or form am I saying he's the odd man out and he's not going to be in Carolina. So you heard those words. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I can't help you if you didn't. But yeah, we'll see what his role is going to be. I'm still very interested to see how it plays out. There's realities, there's not realities. It's whatever you want to think and however you want to feel, I suppose. But yeah, Jalen Coker, still a good player, still has value in Carolina, and I think we'll see that play out again this season. What is the plan for Friday evening or some of the other injury updates? Talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On NFL are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league, to celebrate 28 years of Yahoo football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. So what is the plan for the Carolina Panthers starters on Friday evening as they open up the preseason against the same Cleveland Browns they had joint practice with on Wednesday in Uptown Charlotte? Well, the plan, according to Dave Canales, is for them to play a couple of series. If they get a long first drive, though, they'll be done. So go back to last year. The only time we saw the starters offensively, especially during the preseason, it was that long drive in Buffalo that ended up with Bryce Young finding Jordan Matthews for a touchdown. And it was a job well done, pat on the back. We'll see you boys in a few weeks down there in New Orleans. Now, once they got down to New Orleans, the first play was an interception from Bryce Young, had another one later on, and it was a complete disaster, a complete nightmare. And Bryce was promptly benched 8 days later. So to avoid that scenario playing out again, Dave Canales has had a change of heart. He wants to get his starters out there and avoid it. And that is growth in a second-year head coach. And Bryce was asked about playing in the preseason. He said he's excited about the opportunity. Didn't say that he had a conversation with Dave Canales. Didn't really want to say anything at all because clearly, like, he's not trying to throw his coach under the bus. I don't know what his true feelings are about how things played out last year with them not playing the preseason and how he performed, and then him being promptly benched after 2 games when he didn't even get the preseason and all that. So it's in the past now. Dave's made his decision. And we talked to Alex Zeitlo, the Observer, on Monday, and Alex was saying that was a decision that Dave made way back during, I think, the owners' meetings, which I was not privy to. So I guess that's on me for missing out on it. And then last week I was guessing and obviously got that one wrong. As you know, I'm not perfect. And some of you even think I'm an idiot. And you may be right. But as far as what's going to happen, if they have that long drive, they're done. And Austin Corbett actually, he brought that up. I think it would have been yesterday when he spoke to the media on Tuesday. He brought up that they could possibly not be out there if it's like Buffalo. So that was first indication that it may be a pretty quick one. So if you want to see more of the starters, maybe root for an in and out, or 3 and out, possibly 2, because I don't think they want to not play if they're not going to even get a first down. I don't think they're going to take them out without doing that. Now, the freak out would be huge because it does not appear that Cleveland, according to Spencer German, and I should ask some of the Browns reporters, does not appear that their starters are going to play on Friday. So, I'm guessing they probably get out there, opening drive, score a touchdown, and that's it. Dave wants to see them play 8 to 12 snaps. 8 to 12 snaps could just be one drive. So it sounds like to me one drive. Maybe if it's a quick one, 3 and out, all that, then he'll go ahead and get them out there. If they only get 6 snaps in, maybe he gets them out there for another one. We'll see how it plays out. Certainly, I would love to see them get in at least 2 series, like 2 full series would be really nice to see. But TBD as far as that goes. Not really sure what the plan for the defense is, but it sounds like he said starters. And Javon Merrick, when we talked to him today on Wednesday, didn't seem like he had an idea of what they were going to do defensively. But offensively, it appears they're going to get at least 1 series, maybe 2, depending on how that first series plays out. As far as how this all came to be with joint practice, Dave Canales said he's known Kevin Stefanski, the Browns head coach, for 15 years, dating back to when they were both quality control coaches under Darrell Bevell in Miami. Darrell Bevell, who was the longtime OC in Seattle under Pete Carroll, the man responsible for Russell Wilson not handing the ball off to Marshawn Lynch, but instead being intercepted by Malcolm Butler in that Super Bowl. That was him, Darrell Bevell. Remember the name. As far as JC, again, Dave didn't have a lot of details. Just said stitches in his left thumb, day-to-day, won't play Friday. Wants him to be ready next week in Houston. Claude Sherlis, who had been the number 3 linebacker up until the addition of Chris Barnes, who is 4th on the unofficial depth chart, which again, we'll talk about that on Friday. Don't take any of that to heart there. He is dealing with groin injury, so we'll see how that plays out. That is important roster number wise, as he's a core special teamer, so that could open up the door for somebody else if he's not going to be good to go. And I found this one to be interesting. Dave, just without really anyone asking whether he was doing this, did mention that Brad Idik has been calling all the plays during training camp for the offense. And I know last year, because there's 0 patience ever, if the offense isn't scoring like 40 points a game, people are like, oh, is Brad Idik going to call plays? Like, when's Dave going to hand the play calling to Brad Idik? Last time he wanted that to happen, it didn't do jack. So maybe you learn your lesson, but of course, that's not going to happen for a lot of people. But Brad Idik getting the opportunity, which is actually pretty cool. And I followed up and asked, is that something that he would ask Brad to do in the preseason? And he said that, yeah, he would certainly look to do that at some point in time. I don't know if it's going to happen this preseason. And he also didn't mention the regular season. So it sounds like Dave Canales is open to the possibility of not being the play caller here in Carolina throughout his entire tenure as the head coach. And he also really is doing this for the opportunities for the guys on his staff, because they want to not just be a developmental team on the field, but they also want to do that within the coaching room, which is great to hear that is something that he is really interested in doing. So Brad Idik getting a chance, and like the preseason is all about getting ready for the season. And Brad's a part of the game planning and all of that. So it's not like it's that big of a difference to have him calling plays and Dave calling plays. It's the same offense, which I try to convey to people who are like, change who the play caller is. Same offense. Like, it's not going to change, especially in season. Like, this would be the time to change things. Really, hell, going back to April and May was the time to change things. Like, that's not really what you're getting in October if the offense is struggling and then they decide just to appease somebody to make that kind of change. So good to hear. Ajero Harrell also is doing that with Pete Hansen, the linebacker coach, and Jonathan Cooley. Those guys are getting opportunities at the defensive side of the ball. So cool to hear that is something that they're really working on. And maybe down the road, Brad Idik will be the guy. And I think Frank Reich, one of the biggest issues he had was saying that he was going to be the play caller, that eventually he's going to hand it off to Thomas Brown. And there wasn't really a timeline or a date set in stone. So immediately once he said that, people always wondered, when would Thomas Brown be the play caller? And as soon as things didn't go great, as is often, people were calling for somebody's head and for someone to replace him. And as often happens, nothing changed at all. One last thing. Bryson Tremaine ended practice with a nice diving touchdown in the corner. Really good throw, by the way, by Jack Plummer. We'll see plenty of him on Friday and see how much he has improved. Bryson Tremaine had a couple of touchdown receptions, and he's been a guy who's played special teams, been a nice run blocker. And Dave Canales simply asked, does he have a shot to make the roster? And he said, yeah, he's got a shot. So that is a guy to look at. It's a very deep wide receiver room, so hard to believe he's actually going to make it. But if they look at practice squad, that would be a guy that could have a chance, and he could be one of those core special teamers. I don't think that it's going to happen for him, but we'll see. Because 69 guys are really on the roster, 53 on the active, but 16 on a practice squad. You got to count those guys as being a part of the roster, just knowing how the elevations work and just the injuries and all that plays out throughout a season. So those are my observations. Those are my takeaways from Wednesday mornings joint practice with the Cleveland Browns. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council. The weekly Wednesday mailbag back on September 3rd. But in the meantime, you can hit me up with any questions that you have heading into the training camp, for the rest of training camp, for the rest of the preseason, over on my DMs at Julian Council on Twitter, and just at me over on Blue Sky, also at Julian Council. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll be back with you on Friday as we'll talk about what to watch for during the Panthers preseason opener, and even look at the unofficial depth chart and how much of that you should take seriously. Probably not a lot at all, but we'll talk about all of that here on Locked On Panthers on Friday.